Welcome back to another Mech Deck Tech. We are here, still in Thunder Junction, with another upgrade guide for one of the Commander Precons. Most Wanted, helmed by Olivia, Opulent Outlaw. So Olivia cares about outlaws, specifically having them deal damage to a player, meaning that in a single round of combat, assuming we don't have extra combat steps, though that is technically possible in red, we're going to create a treasure, so we can get 3 treasures per round, and we can pay 3 mana to sacrifice 2 treasures, putting 2+1/+1 counters on each creature we control, doing so at sorcery speed. As always, with all of the Precon upgrade guides, we're going to take 10 cards out, add 10 cards in, try and up the synergy a little bit, and then we will have some honorable mentions afterwards, cards that are a little too expensive to justify having everyone pick up singles of, or cards that just didn't quite make my top 10, but are highly synergistic nevertheless. That being said, let's take a look at what didn't make that cut. Starting off the list, we have Angrath's Marauders, a 7-cost 4/4 that makes it so whenever we deal damage to a permanent or player, we're dealing double instead. The effect is obviously good, right? If we're getting in for combat damage, it's double. If we're dealing burn damage, that burn damage is doubled. However, 7 mana for a 4/4 is just too expensive. There are other ways to increase the damage we're dealing, and honestly, this kind of just feels like a win more situation and not something we actually care about all that much. Bandit's Haul. So this is a 3-cost mana rock, which we know we're not big fans of here. Whenever we commit a crime, we put a loot counter on it. It will only trigger once a turn, so a little slow. And for 2 mana and tapping it, so effectively 3 mana, because we're not getting access to that mana rock, we're going to draw a single card. It's really slow. I don't like 3-cost mana rocks. We could do better. Bounty Board, another 3-cost mana rock, so not that shocking that we're getting rid of it. We could pay effectively 2 mana, because again we're not getting access to the mana from the mana rock, to tap this down at sorcery speed and put a bounty on a creature. When a creature with a bounty on it dies, each of its controller's opponents draws a card and gains 2 life. So this also falls into Group Hug, which I'm also just not for. Right, I'm drawing 2 of my opponents a card and gaining them 2 life. It's not doing it for me. That's not very crime related. Curtain's Call, a 6-cost instant. It is undaunted, so it does cost 1 less for each opponent whenever we cast it. So it could be as cheap as 3 and get rid of 2 creatures. But if it's down to a 1v1, it is still 5 mana to get rid of 2 creatures. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, it's just a little expensive, and sure, we're generating treasures in this deck, so we should have a fair bit of mana. But I'd rather use those treasures for Olivia's effect, if we're being honest, to boost our board. Following up that Curtain's Call, we have a Dire Fleet Daredevil. A 2-cost, 2/1 first-striking pirate. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to exile an instant or sorcery from an opponent's grave. We can cast it this turn, and spend mana of any color in order to cast it. Once that spell is cast, it is just left out in exile. We don't get to let them recur it later. It's not bad. It does commit crimes, which we're kind of about to a little bit of an extent in this deck. It is a mercenary itself, or an outlaw rather, not necessarily a mercenary. If there's something cool in there, that's great. But I feel like early on, this is kind of just dead in hand. You really don't want to play it, but you do want to get out these creatures and start dealing damage. So it doesn't quite fit the theme of the deck. Kamber the Plunderer is a 4-cost 3/4 that has Partner, specifically with another creature that we are going to cut. Spoilers. It is a lifelinking 3/4, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we get to gain life and create a blood token. Blood tokens are my least favorite kind of token, honestly, out of all the artifact tokens that do a thing. The life gain is incidental. We're not doing a whole lot of like life gain matters type effects in here. And, you know, looting's cool, right? It's card selection. It's not quite as good as card draw. But, you know, I think we could do better. And in tandem, we have Laurine, the Diversion. Sure, we're gonna go with Laurine, the Diversion. I really feel like I'm butchering that name, though. Either way, they are a 3/3 for 3 with first strike. They are a rogue. The other partner was also rogue, so they are both outlaws. We could pay 2 to sacrifice an artifact to goad a creature. So, Laurine, the Diversion, is actually a little more of a rough cut for me. The ability to goad our opponent's creatures by sacking 2 artifacts, or sacking an artifact and having paid 2 mana is pretty good. We don't focus a ton on goad, but I know that goad could be a very effective strategy in more aggressive decks like this type. Just to keep people away from us. But it felt weird to keep her but lose her partner, who I don't like at all. So I cut them both. Life Insurance is a 5-cost enchantment that does nothing on its own, right? It's only when a non-token creature dies that we lose a life and create a treasure. Don't get me wrong, this can be powerful. The issue is, oh, we're playing against a bunch of other people, and someone casts a board wipe, and we just lose, you know, 12 life all at once or something. And if we haven't been keeping our life total high, we could die from this. You know, the fact that whenever we cast a spell, we could pay for the extort kind of balances out a little bit. But I feel like this is like a timing-specific style card, and I just don't know that it has room here. Mirror Entity is interesting. It's a changeling. It's a 1/1 for 3, which isn't great, but it's obviously that cost because of its ability to pump all of our creatures to be whatever type and power we want for the turn. You know, if we have enough mana, we could use it to get around damage-based board wipes. If we have some sort of trample creatures or some like creatures with evasion, we could also use it to just sort of finish off opponents before, you know, they get a chance to fight back. But it feels a little awkward, and again, I feel like we have better outlaws out there. Last of our cuts is Shoot the Sheriff, which destroys a non-outlaw creature. It is targeted removal, which isn't as good in Commander as it is in other formats, just because you have so many opponents that you're playing against. And the fact that, like, that's a good handful of archetypes that it's just dead against. So, I think for 2 mana, we could find better single-targeted removals if we wanted to. That being said, we of course have added in 10 new cards. Let's take a look at what they are. Revel in Riches is a 5-cost enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we're going to create a treasure. And is an alternate win con. It is our kind of like pricey card. It's sitting around like the $15 mark. Also have the Reaver Cleaver sitting at like $18. I feel like it was slightly cheaper when I put it on this list. But either way, Reaver Cleaver, 3-cost equipment. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 trample. Whenever they deal damage to a player or planeswalker, you create that many treasure tokens. 3 costs to equip, so you're spending 6 mana total, which is a little expensive, but you are adding on trample, you're generating a bunch of mana, so it pays for itself pretty quickly. Unexpected Windfall is gonna be 4 mana plus a discard to draw 2 cards and create 2 treasures. So replaces itself, and whenever you discard, gives us back 2 of the 4 mana we spent on it. We can do this at instant speed, so you know, it really fits the treasure synergy that we're going for here. Big Score is the same thing. It does cost, you know, 3 generic and 1 red as opposed to 2 generic and 2 red. but I don't think that those costs really make a huge difference. Either way, we're going to discard a card. When we cast it at instant speed, draw 2, create 2 treasures, we're good to go. Brass's Bounty. This is 7 mana, but once we have enough lands, you know, we're going to generate just a ton of treasures, and we have effects that care about us creating treasures. We have things that, you know, want us to specifically use mana from treasures for their effects. So I think Brass's Bounty, despite being a little expensive, is still pretty strong here. Moving up into our creatures, we have Xorn. Xorn is a 3-cost 3/2. If we would create one or more treasures, we get to create an extra one. Professional Facebreaker, a Menacey 2/3 for 3. Whenever one or more of our creatures deal combat damage to a player, we're going to create a treasure token. So, in addition to that, right, we're generating more treasures from just dealing combat damage, which we love, but we can also sacrifice treasures for impulse draw. This really lets us dig for answers and, you know, outvalue our opponents in terms of having basically our entire deck as a hand. The Pitiless Plunderer is up next. They are a 1/4 for 4. Whenever another creature that we control dies, we get to create a treasure token. Lortho, Corrupt Sheriff, is a 2/1 for 2. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, we're going to lose a life and create a treasure. So this is only going to trigger once a turn, because obviously you only cast your second spell once a turn. Well, I guess it could technically trigger up to 4 times if all 4 players cast 2 spells in a single turn. Unlikely, though. But just a good early play. You know, we're going to be looking to... We're definitely willing to pay that 1 life by casting 2 spells in a turn to generate ourselves a treasure. Lortho is good in treasure decks. Grim Hireling is last. Sits around like the $17 mark. So again, kind of expensive. I think this is one of my more expensive upgrade guides, if we're being honest. But whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we create not 1 but 2 treasure tokens. We can pay a single black and sacrifice X treasures to basically wither away an opponent's creature. We can only do so at sorcery speed, so we can't use it as a combat trick. A little sad, but very understandable. But yeah, those are the upgrade guides. Hopefully you enjoyed them. If you feel like some cards don't fit, let me know which. If you feel like I'm missing some cards, let me know which they are. But with that being said, let's jump into some honorable mentions, shall we? Starting off the honorable mentions, we have Ancient Copper Dragon. They are like a $70 to $90 card, so just stupid expensive. Whenever they deal damage to a player, we do get to roll a d20 and create a bunch of treasures, which is very nice. But far too expensive to recommend people run out and pick one up. Crime Novelist is much more affordable. So whenever we sack an artifact, they get a little bigger, and we get to add an extra red mana. So, effectively, all of our treasures sack for red plus whatever color we want. Dockside Extortionist, also expensive, sitting between like $80 and $100. You know him, you love him, he's a Commander All-Star. Whenever he ETBs, we're going to create a treasure for each artifact and enchantment an opponent controls. Goldspan Dragon, flying haste if it attacks or becomes the target of any spell. We get to create a treasure token, and all of our treasures now sack for 2 mana, not just 1. Catalog Dangerous Mind, 3-cost 3/2 for strike haste. Whenever it attacks, we get to create a treasure. We could sacrifice 5 to gain control of a creature for as long as we control Kellogg. So actually really strong in this deck. We're going to be generating a lot of treasures anyways. And once we have enough treasures, we basically just get to steal all of our opponent's creatures, laugh all the way to the bank. Obvious potential add is obvious. It's Mirkwood Bats. They're actually very budget. They sit around $1. Whenever we create or sacrifice a token, talking about you treasures, each opponent will lose a life. Mondrek, Glory, Dominus. You know, token doubler. That's what they're here for. They are like $40 to $50, so a little too expensive. Regavan, Nimble Pilferer. So they're a pirate, which is great, fits our theme. Whenever they deal damage to a player, we're going to create a treasure and impulse draw off the top of their deck. We could dash them out to, like, have them bounce back to hand, but I think we're pretty good here. Prosper Tomebound. It sits around like the $25 to $30 mark. I actually have a Prosper Tomebound deck that does work. But at the beginning of end step, we're going to impulse draw. We can play that card until the end of our following turn, and whenever we play one of these cards from exile, we get to create a treasure token. They're also a warlock, so we have that going for us. Another outlaw. Odratak, Deepest Foundation, token tripler. Just stupid good. What's that? More tokens? Anointed Procession. Double up those tokens. It's like $50 to $60. It's too expensive to recommend. Black Market Connections. $25. So again, kind of expensive. But lose a life at our pre-combat main phase, create a treasure is good. Draw a card for 2 life is pretty good. And creating a shapeshifter is fine here. We do need to be careful with our life, because again, I don't think we have a lot of life gain in this deck. Last up is Smothering Tithe. Another Commander All-Star, sits around the $25 to $30 mark. When an opponent draws a card, they can pay 2. If they don't, we get a treasure. But those are all of the honorable mentions. Some of them are just not in because, again, they're very pricey. Some of them are just not in because they didn't quite make my top 10, despite being pretty synergistic. If you enjoyed the video, I would ask that you kindly subscribe to the channel. Like the video. Leave some comments about, what you liked and didn't like about the upgrade guide itself. But I'm Mechanized Minion, and until next time, good luck with your builds.